Good afternoon, everybody. On my watch, it says 2:30, so that's what I'm sticking with. We're meeting today for the purpose of capital budget hearings with the Capital Budget Subcommittee. Today, we're going to be hearing from the Department of Veteran Affairs, Department of Planning, Department of Ag, Maryland State Library Agency, St. Mary's College, Department of Juvenile Services. We are first going to be calling up the analyst, and then we'll have the agency response. We're going to start first with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and then we're going to go to the St. Mary's College of Maryland, Department of Planning, Department of Ag, Maryland State Library Agency, and Department of Juvenile Services. So we'll start with you, Ms. Rai. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the capital budget analysis for the Department of Veterans Affairs, or MDVA. On page 1, we have the capital improvement program, which includes 3 projects through fiscal 29. We have Crownsville Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvement Phase 4 project, which is a new project starting in fiscal 25 with a request of $1.1 million in GEO bonds. The new state veterans home in Sykesville is an ongoing project with a fiscal 25 request of approximately $48 million in PAYGO federal fund, and the Garrison Forest Veterans Cemetery Expansion and Improvements Phase 6 project, which is an out-year state-owned project with no funding request for fiscal 25. Pages 3 through page 8 highlight the 2 projects programmed into the 2024 CIP. The first one is the Crownsville Veterans Cemetery project. This project is expected to exhaust its columbarium space by fiscal 28 and requires an expansion of its columbarium structures and burial capacity. While other phases of the project have received funding in past CIPs, the phase 4 receives its first allocation in fiscal 25. This expansion project will add approximately 5,000 cascaded grave sites and approximately 2,200 niche columbarium structures to meet the anticipated burial needs for a minimum of 10 years. The expansion includes construction of a new administration building and a 4-bay maintenance garage, including parking space. Site enhancements include improving existing irrigation system, stormwater management system, and landscaping. The fiscal 25 includes $1.1 million in GEO bonds provided by the state for the design of this project, which will be reimbursed through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, USDVA, Veterans Cemetery Grant Program, and construction will be entirely federally funded. This recommendation of $1.1 million in fiscal 25 is $297,000 more than the requested amount because the USDVA requires 10% of the total estimated project cost upfront to make the project eligible for the grant program, the Veterans Cemetery Grant Program. The fiscal 25 budget includes funding to begin design and construction. Design is expected to begin in September 2024 and end in November 2025. The construction is expected to begin in July 2026 and end in July 2028. DLS notes that the CIP programs construction funds in fiscal 26 and 27, but the project schedule suggests that the construction funds will not be required until fiscal 27. The operating budget impact of this project is expected to cost approximately $161,000 in fiscal 28 and approximately $176,000 in fiscal 29. The department notes that staffing requirements may be reassessed upon the completion of the project. Page 5 highlights the second project programmed into the 2024 CIP. This is a 128-bed new state veterans home at Sykesville, which provides additional bed space for Maryland's veterans that will be more centrally located and closer to health facilities. The total funding required for the project from fiscal 25 to fiscal 27 is $129 million. The project has received approximately $70 million in general fund for planning and construction since the beginning of the project in June 2022. The fiscal 25 budget includes approximately $47.9 million in PAYGO federal funds for construction and equipment procurement. The project design started in July 2023 and is expected to end in November 24. The schematic designs were received on February 1st of this year, and the Department of General Services is expected to complete reviewing it by the end of February. Construction is expected to begin in March 2025 and end in September 2027. This project is eligible for the Federal State Home Construction Grant, a program that shares the cost of new veterans' homes with the states. In June 2023, the project was listed on the Priority 1 list, but was not selected for funding in fiscal 24. The federal fiscal 25 grant priority list is expected to be published between January and April of this year, which provides an opportunity to receive federal funding for the project. The department intends to meet all project requirements for a conditional grant award that includes having at least 35% drawings and environmental assessment review completed. While the schematic design was received in February, we request the department to provide an update on the environmental assessment review and if it is on track to submit all the requirement documents for the conditional award. The department should also comment on its contingency plan if the project is not selected for federal funding in federal fiscal 25. Also, the first architectural and engineering cost estimate was received by the department and notes that the estimates were higher than the design to budget estimate. The department reported that the DGS project manager is working to revise the drawings to identify efficiencies. We request the department to comment on the impact of this revision on its submission of required documents for the federal grant and the overall project schedule. The operating budget impact of this project is expected to cost approximately $10.4 million in fiscal 28 and grow over $21 million in fiscal as residents are added to the home after its completion. Exhibit 1 on page 7 shows the state's veteran population by county, the location of the current home, and the planned location of the future home in Sykesville. The USDVA estimate for Maryland's veteran population shows a statewide decline from 356,000 in calendar 2022 to 348,000 in calendar 2023. The occupancy rate at Charlotte Hall, which is the existing veterans home, has declined from 403 residents, or 89% of capacity in December 2019 to 227 residents in December 2023. Page 8 outlines the out-year project not programmed in 2024 CIP, which is the Garrison Forest Veteran Cemetery Expansion and Improvements Phase 6 project. This project adds an estimated 4,200 pre-placed crypts, 2,300 columbarium wall niches, and 1,700 in-ground cremains plots. This project received its first funding in fiscal 23 and was previously estimated to be completed in fiscal 27. Due to a delay in the project schedule, funding schedule for fiscal 25 is deferred to fiscal 26, and the project is now expected to complete in fiscal 28. The department notes that the Veterans Cemetery Grant application for this project has been received by USDVA and expects to receive an update on the application status on or after July 1st, 2024. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance for PAYGO federal fund of approximately $48 million for the new state veterans home in Sykesville. DLS also recommends approving the $1.1 million in GEO bonds for the Phase 4 Crownsville Veteran Cemetery Expansion and Improvement Project to meet the federal requirement of 10% of the total estimated project cost up front to make this Veterans Cemetery Expansion Project eligible for the Veteran Cemetery Grant Program. DLS's key observations and recommendations are on page 2 of this analysis. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Rye. As always, great job. Any questions for Ms. Rye? Sandy? Great. Mr. Secretary, come on up. And just a note, their legislators are coming in and out because some of them have bill hearings. So if you notice people coming in and out, that's probably why. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready to go, you can start. You and your team. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Tony Woods, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm here with our Director of Finance, Elena Charland. I want to start by thanking Yasho for her thorough analysis of our budget. It's been great working with her to work through all of this. I also just wanted to take a very brief moment to honor the memory of one of Maryland's truly great veteran leaders, my predecessor, a member of the Maryland General Assembly in the House of Delegates, former Secretary George Owings, who passed away in October. I witness his impact daily in the quality of the team that he built at the department. And I could say that I don't think any veteran has not had a positive impact thanks to George Owings' work. And so I'm just appreciative of that. A second state veterans home was a dream of his for decades, and it's my privilege to carry that torch forward. So much of that work is done right here in this subcommittee. This past year, it's been an honor to lead the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs team in writing a new chapter and transforming the department to be even more responsive to the needs of the military-connected community. We're working closely with our new Charlotte Hall contractor to implement the changes needed to bring that facility to become a 5-star facility. We're simultaneously moving closer to making our new veterans home in Sykesville a reality, which will bring skilled nursing care geographically much closer to many of our most vulnerable veterans. With regard to your request for an update on the environmental assessment, our environmental consultant is in the process of completing the phase 2 of the environmental site assessment, and this assessment should be completed within a few weeks. With regard to the architecture and engineering drawings, the A&E is actually still very much on track with the design development submission. We understand these types of changes are actually not unusual this early in the design process. And the A&E team is working diligently to bring the project back into the programmed square footage, which will also help to bring this back into the cost back into an acceptable range. Turning back to our cemetery and memorial program, we're again partnering with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to expand capacity at Crownsville Veterans Cemetery so that we can continue to provide a final resting place for Maryland's veterans and dependents for many years to come. So I'm mindful that you have many budget presentations before you today. So I'll simply respect your time and state that we're here in full support of the governor's allowance, and we'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions for the secretary? Mr. Secretary, there's been, I've heard that there's some, I guess, concern with Garrison Forest in terms of, I don't know if it's in terms of it being on track, but I've just heard from a lot of people from the community. Have you heard any concerns about it and how it's doing?
Would you mind actually, I went ahead and brought our director of our cemetery program, if you'd love to, if it's okay for me to call him up. Russ, if you'd want to join us real quick. Thank you. So this is Russ Ware, who oversees our cemetery and memorial program.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Any updates with regard to Garrison Forest?
Could you be more specific on what you're what you would like to have detail on?
Yeah, I mean, so my understanding is that there's concern from the community. Well, some community members have expressed concern about, I guess, the pace and also the impact of how the project's going to go, and just wanted to get a sense of kind of where we are with it and what you're hearing on the ground.
Well, my understanding, and of course, this is based off of my experience in the position. We are running as normal as we should, especially with the Veteran Cemetery Grants Program. Working with them has been a very big honor of mine because I got to know them firsthand and work closely with Department of General Services to make sure that the outlook and the capacity for Garrison Forest reaches its full potential. And with this next grant, we'll see a big increase on what's needed at that cemetery, especially create a big impact for the community itself.
Well, thank you very much. What I may do is at some point offline, maybe pull in Senator Hedelman, just since she represents that area, just to make sure that I have to check if she has any, thoughts on it. But thank you very much. Any other questions? Senator Jennings.
First of all, Secretary, thank you very much for those kind words from George Owings. Incredible man. Honored to serve with them, and I appreciate that. The one thing that piqued my interest when they mentioned it was the Charlotte Hall vacancy rate. It's dropped. I'm just curious why went from 89% down to 51%.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, Senator, a couple things. So first and foremost, actually, sadly, we lost a number of residents during the pandemic, a very significant number. So I would say that was actually the largest driver of the reduction in the census. The previous management contractor had started to work on trying to bring more folks into the facility. When we went through the challenges that we identified and are sort of very well known, I actually made the decision to pause on new admissions for a period of time while we stabilized the situation there. And then we've actually just started to accept new residents as of November. And so the new management contractor, Pruitt Health, is working to market this very vital resource to our veteran community across the state. And so we've actually seen those census numbers start to increase. One other additional point that I would add is, as we work to bring on the Sykesville home, we're also simultaneously starting the process of doing a very necessary renovation work at Charlotte
I
Hall.
saw that on page 8. It
Yeah.
mentions that. Okay.
And so we'll see a period of time where we'll kind of need to keep the number somewhat reasonable so we can renovate wings at a time or buildings at a time, and then bring those back up to a higher number.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. And I echo what Senator Jennings said. Thank you for bringing up Senator former Delegate George Owings, Secretary Owings. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We'll now turn our attention to St. Mary's College.
Thank you, Senator.
And we will, Kelly Norton. Nope. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. As shown on page 1, St. Mary's College of Maryland has 3 projects in the 2025 CIP: the Campus Infrastructure Improvements Program, the Montgomery Hall renovation, and the Calvert Hall Interior Improvement Project. The total in the CIP for these projects is $50.6 million in general obligation bonds. We can turn to page 3 for the only project scheduled to receive funding in fiscal 2025. The Campus Infrastructure Improvements Program is an ongoing project that began in fiscal 2017. Since the start of the program, St. Mary's College has funded 21 projects, completing over half of those projects, with an additional 5 projects at least 80% complete. The CIP is requesting $2.1 million in general obligation bonds for fiscal 2025. The funding would be used for the design and construction of the college's North Campus nodal loop improvements. This project was scheduled to begin in fiscal 2024, but was deferred due to the Schaefer Hall HVAC project coming in over the estimated budget. And the fiscal 2024 funding for the nodal campus loop project was used to complete the Schaefer Hall project. DLS recommends approving all proposed authorizations.
Thank you very much for that thorough analysis. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Madam President, come up. Feel free to bring anyone else from your team and start whenever you're ready.
I think we can say that they have my back today, so they're going to just sit there. Good afternoon, Chair Zucker and members of the Senate Capital Budget Subcommittee. I am Tawanda Jordan, President of St. Mary's College of Maryland. With me today are Paula Collins, Vice Chair of our Board of Trustees, as well as our Director of Government Affairs, Brandon Engel. Before I begin, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the college's FY25 budget requests, as well as Kelly Norton and the rest of GLS for an excellent analysis of the CIP. We are immensely grateful for your continued support of St. Mary's College. Turning now to our FY25 projects, the governor's capital budget includes $2.1 million in general obligation bond funding toward North Campus nodal loop improvements as part of the college's campus infrastructure improvements project. This ongoing series of projects is part of the college's concerted effort to reduce our deferred maintenance backlog, and funding for these investments is essential to implementing our most recent strategic plan by enabling us to attract, recruit, and retain talented staff, students, and faculty. Additional projects in this program for the out years are detailed in our written testimony. Changes from last year's CIP by DBM include the deferral and reduction of design funding for the college's Montgomery Hall renovation project, from 1.65 million in FY 25 and 1.057 million in FY 26 to zero FY 25 design support and 1.226 in FY 26. I want to emphasize that design funds were awarded and used to initiate this work in FY 24. In addition to these design funds, DBM has planned for FY 26 funding to include $15.3 million to begin construction and $200,000 for capital equipment. A busy year. This renovation project remains core to our strategic planning efforts, and renovation of the entire 40-year-old building is anticipated to improve energy efficiency, update code compliance, and address programmatic space deficiencies. Once again, I would like to thank the committee for its continued support of St. Mary's College of Maryland. This concludes our testimony. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the president? Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Committee will now turn our attention to Department of Planning. Start out with Ms. Cook. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Carrie Cook from DLS presenting the analysis for the Department of Planning. Beginning on page 1, the 2024 CIP includes a total of $27.9 million for the department's 4 grant and loan programs, $300,000 in PAYGO special funds for the MHT loan program, $600,000 in GEO bonds for the MHT grant program, $5 million for the African American Heritage Grant Program, and $22 million for the Historic Revitalization Tax Credit in general funds. So turning to page 3, just some updates on some state-owned capital projects that were in the CIP in previous years. The Patterson House facility, which is at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum down in Calvert County, is ongoing construction to rehabilitate the facility and open it up to public programming later in the year. They expect to complete that construction in May and hope to open the facility for public programming in the fall. They also added some positions on the operating side to support increased public programming there. And also at JPPM on page 4, the MAC lab, which is the archaeology lab on the campus, is going through a major expansion and rehab project, basically so that they can continue to expand the number of collections that they have at the facility and interpret more artifacts. So they hope the construction is going to start there in summer 2024, continue into probably either 25 or 26. Turning now to the 4 programs in the grant and loan side on page 5, the Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program. There was a mandate passed in 2022 that increases the mandate for this program to $20 million annually in general funds, plus an additional $2 million for the small commercial portion of the fund. So you can see on Exhibit 1 here on page 5, the total amount of projects that they've been able to assisted have jumped, significantly in 23 and 24, just due to that increased mandate. And there's, a lot of interest in this program, obviously, because it's giving you a tax credit. And at the bottom of page 5, that's just an update on an issue that we talked about last year in terms of digitizing the application process. So before, folks had to mail in forms, which was quite tedious. So MHT sort of timed the digitization of their application process with the national park side, since many folks apply for state and national funding for similar tax credits. So now both of them are completely digital, and they've gotten really good feedback on, that increasing the efficiency, reducing costs and all that stuff for the program. The MHT loan program is discussed on page 6. So the big change here is Chapter 203 from last year, which authorizes MHT to transfer funds to qualifying nonprofits coming out of this loan fund. So MHT anticipates making one such transfer of $300,000 in fiscal 2024. So this is not a loan. It will not be paid back. It's actually a transfer. So that is going to bring the fund balance down for that loan fund. So DLS has just asked the department to brief the committees on the timing of the transfer and what role MHT and the department will have in ensuring that the funds transferred are supporting historic preservation goals that are the mission of the project, or the fund, excuse me. Page 6 and 7 discusses the MHT Capital Grant Program. So these are non-repayable grants for similar purposes in historic structures. So page 7, Exhibit 2 shows capital grant applicants and awards. So you can see in that last column there that about 15 to 20% of people that are applying for these grants are actually receiving the funding. So there is a lot of interest and not quite enough funds to go around. And so I just wanted to highlight the beginning in fiscal 2026, the program is planned to receive additional funding of $1 million in GO bonds, which is an increase. Right now they're getting $600,000. So hopefully they will be able to assist more folks that are sending in those applications. And finally, the African American Heritage Preservation Program is discussed starting on page 7. So this also had an increased mandate from Chapter 29 of 2022. It increased the mandate from 1 million to 5 million annually. It also increased the per project cap, as well as eliminating the matching requirement. So obviously there are a lot more folks that are interested in this program. They're seeing a lot of applications, and they're able to continue to support these projects. One other thing that I wanted to note here is that a lot of these funds are not being expended because the nonprofits are not able to complete their project. They get some funding, but then the costs escalate. They have to come back for more money to finish the project, or they have issues with contractors. So because of this additional funding availability, the department is hopeful that more organizations will actually be able to complete their projects. Then they'll get those funds expended and get them out the door. The recommendations are to concur with the governor's allowance for the 22.5 million in PAYGO funding and the 5.6 million in GO bonds. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Cook. Any questions for Ms. Cook? All right, well, thank you very much for that really great analysis. I'll call up the department. Come on up. Welcome. Good to see everybody.
Thank you. Secretary Flores sends her regrets. The governor asked her to testify on a bill that's being heard in the House at the same time. So my name's Elizabeth Hughes. I'm the director of the Maryland Historical Trust, which is an agency within the Maryland Department of Planning. And I'm joined by Jeffrey Can, our Assistant Secretary of Operations to my right, and Rod Cofield, who's the director of Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum to my left. We certainly thank Carrie Cook for her analysis. As always, someone told me it was her birthday today. I don't know if that's true, but if so, best wishes. Mine was yesterday, so go Pisces. We concur with the DLS recommendations, and there is one question we need to answer. You have a written response, but this has to do with the MHT loan program. The transfer, we received one transfer application this year. This is the first year that we are exercising this new opportunity that is a result of legislation passed last year. We received one application for $300,000 to transfer. We would expect to, we're reviewing that application now. We would have that funding encumbered by the end of the fiscal year. We would expect that those funds would be, we would be working with the transfer applicant through a transfer agreement, much like a grant agreement we would have in place, so that we would be working with them on how those funds would be expended to the extent that they may wish to loan some of those funds out to a third party. We'll be working with them to develop guidelines for how that loan program is administered to the extent that they're using those funds to rehabilitate properties that they own. We would be reviewing those scopes of work according to the Secretary of the Interior standards. So that's how we expect that relationship to proceed. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Committee will now turn our attention to the Department of Agriculture. I heard a rumor that Andrew Gray was here. The rumor is correct.
Thank you, sir. It is not my birthday today. So page 1, Department of Agriculture, Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Was it yesterday, Mr. Gray?
That was not actually. Thank you for asking. Maryland Department of Agriculture's capital analysis, two programs here, the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, or MALP, that's around $36.5 million, and $8 million from Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program. The bottom of page 1, you'll see an increase in the amount of special funds going out in the CIP, Capital Improvement Program, due to the return of higher estimates for the transfer tax. Turning to Exhibit 1 on page 5, you see kind of a big picture look at changes between the 2 years for the MALP. The big picture here is a reduction of $16.6 million in mandated general funds. That was forward funding that was provided as repayment for prior year transfer tax repayments provided last year. That's not in the fiscal 25 budget, $16 million reduction, then $43.1 million difference in the transfer tax funding. Really, what you're seeing here is that the revenue estimate for fiscal 25 is lower than it was for fiscal 24. And we're also seeing an underattainment of revenues from fiscal 23. I meant we thought we were going to get a certain amount, we got less, and therefore we have to account for that in fiscal 2025, which reduces the amount of funding available for programs. In terms of the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program, or MAX, there's a $4 million increase in general obligation bonds. The first program then, Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, the detailed look at the transfer tax, since you asked, was the information shown there. In terms of the transfer tax base funding goes around by $8.8 million in terms of the allocation to MALP, but the transfer tax under-attainment difference is really where they're losing a lot of the transfer tax funding money. And that's a $34.4 million decrease. The funding does go up by $1.5 million for local funding from local participation from counties. In terms of some of the concerns that are kind of laid out in the analysis on page 8, Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program has not been able to effectively use federal funding, the Agricultural Easement Conservation Program, due to a number of constraints on that program as detailed on that page. There's the hope that the 2023 Farm Bill will change some of those constraints, allowing farmers in Maryland to be able to use that federal money, but the Farm Bill has been pushed out till September 2024, so we won't see a change for a little while at least. In terms of some other comments on the bottom of page 8, MALP has had some challenges with staffing. Pleased to announce that they're fully staffed, and the Department of General Services as well. So it looks like things are going pretty well in terms of staffing. For the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Programs on page 9, DLS notes that typically the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program does not encumber the full amount of its in-year funding. So if they were to receive $8 million in fiscal 2025, they would not encumber that $8 million. They might encumber $8 million total, money from prior years, but they wouldn't necessarily encumber the entirety of that new year of funding. Therefore, DLS is recommending a $3 million reduction, which would allow for still an $8 million program, accounting for the fact that money from fiscal 24 will roll over into fiscal 25. So it's still an $8 million program. It just wouldn't be all $8 million from fiscal 25 funding. All right, moving now to the one issue in the analysis on page 10. This concerns the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program. Chapter 20 of 2021 increased the amount of funding that can go to the Agricultural Cost Share Program for best management practices. These are the natural filter practices. That's great. 100% funding is obviously a lot better than 87.5% funding. But Exhibit 3 on page 11 shows that we're not really seeing a big increase in the amount, the overall percentage of interest in that funding or the use of that funding over time. And that funding is actually, that increase of 100% for natural filters will expire in fiscal 2026. Therefore, DLS recommends that MDA comment on the lack of a substantial increase in the percentage of natural filters practices, despite that 100% increase, and also to comment why max funding, which is not spatially targeted, the reason for that. That's any questions. That concludes the analysis.
Any questions for Mr. Gray? Mr. Gray, I have about 50 of them.
I'll take them offline. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much. Secretary Addix, good to see you. Come on up. Start whenever you're ready.
Good to see you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having us in here, and thank you to Mr. Gray for the analysis. I'd like to call up 3 members of my team, just in case you have questions. We will take them live and in person. We've got Hans Schmidt, who is our Assistant Secretary for Resource Conservation. We have Michelle Cable, who is the Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, and Rachel Jones, who you all know as the one in charge of our government relations and government affairs. So just a few brief comments. First and foremost, The budget that you have in front of you reflects the core values of not only this administration, but the longstanding values of this department, which are to make Maryland the greenest state in the country and support the expansion of agricultural programs. When you think of agriculture, it's not just good for Maryland, it's good for the health of our students who are eating fresh and local food. It's good for our Bay because these practices, when put into place and the funds that are in this budget to put best management practices in place are far better than development. And so our goal is to keep Maryland green and keep the Bay in good health. A couple of points. We understand and appreciate the challenges that you are under, just given the financial situation and fiscal situation of the state. But I would encourage you to fund these two as came through in the governor's budget. And just a number of reasons why. The first is that we, to Mr. Gray's point, when you talk about the best management practices, we are, because of the Bay Commission's, the Bay Program's Caesar report, we are thinking differently about how we deploy our best management practices. They used to be a la carte to any farmer who would like to install a grass waterway or go through the cover crop program or improve their drainage ditches, whatever it might be. But the Caesar report has said, hey, look, with the advancement of development, with the continued need to grow and farm, we should move to a targeted approach. And so we're working on a pilot program internally. We are supporting a number of bills that are out there to do as much. And the targeted approach, just to give you a visual, it is to spatially aim these BMPs at a specific area that has been known to be subject to pollution. And so rather than a BMP here, there, and all over the state, we will pick an area and then pick another area and focus those BMPs and reward farmers for taking on more of those BMPs. So we're very excited about that program. The last thing I'll say is about the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation. Preserving land has been so critical. In Maryland, we are leaders in land preservation, and we love that counties are in competition to see who can preserve more land. And that's not to preserve it from farming, it's to preserve it with farming, to make sure that farmers have the ability to retain that land in this incredibly tough real estate market. And I say tough because if you're a farmer, which we believe is the highest and best use for that land, growing food for our community, you are increasingly and almost daily approached by developers, land developers and solar developers, et cetera, who would like to find a new higher and best use for that land. Once it goes away, once it's developed, it doesn't go back to ag land. And we saw during the pandemic the incredible need to source locally. So with that, I would ask for full funding as stated in the governor's budget, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the secretary or his team? Great. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Secretary. Good to see you.
Take care. You too.
Yep, you will. Committee will now turn our attention to the Maryland State Library Agency. Ms. Andrade. Good to see you. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Andrade, and I'm here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the capital budget for the Maryland State Library Agency. On the first page of this analysis, you can see that the 25 request totals $12 million, from which $7.5 million are a mandated amount per Chapter 27 of 2021. And it also includes $4.5 million allocated to previously funded projects to support ongoing design and to advance construction according to project schedules. Now I'm going to turn to Exhibit 1 on pages 3, 4, and 5. And Exhibit 1 shows the list of projects under the fiscal 25 budget. The proposed budget includes 7 projects with grants ranging from $131,000 to $2.8 million. The estimated total cost of this project is $74.4 million, including $3.8 million in prior authorizations and $979,000 in projected future requests. As you can see, 5 projects have received funds previously and 2 projects are newly funded in fiscal 25. One thing to notice here is that the Forest Park Library project is funded with both state and supplemental funds. As I mentioned before, the fiscal 25 budget shows a total of $979,000 in anticipated future requests to complete 2 of these projects. Therefore, supplemental funding may not be needed in fiscal 26 of the $7.5 million base funding will be available to fund new projects. So MSLA should comment on the anticipated supplemental request for future fiscal years and discuss the strategies for managing its future project pipeline to mitigate the need for supplemental funding above the mandate in the future. On page 6, there is an update related to a delay in the new Pocomoke Library project. The fiscal 24 capital budget provided $2.2 million in construction funding for the Worcester County new Pocomoke Library, but the project was deferred due to changes in the location and environmental concerns. Due to multiple deferrals since fiscal 2020, Worcester County opted to proceed promptly with the project by constructing a new facility on the existing library site. Regarding the environmental concerns, an underground fuel oil tank was removed in June 2023. And the risk assessment for the new construction has been completed by the Maryland Department of Environment on September 26, 2023. The fiscal 25 budget includes further $1.8 million for this project. In the issues section, the first issue that we want to present to the committees is related to the status of the projects in the fiscal 2024 budget. And as you can see on page 7, exhibit 2 shows this list. And here we have that projects in Calvert County, the Twin Beaches branch, and in Caroline County, the Denton branch. Shows substantial completion. They will reach substantial completion by March and April, respectively. And related to the status of the Bel Air project, MSLA has granted an extension of the fiscal 23 Bel Air branch renovation capital grant totaling $1.4 million until June 2024. The delay is explained by the county administration's decision to postpone all county capitals projects to allow time for a comprehensive review of ongoing initiatives. The agency indicated that as of December 2023, the county executive has not communicated any updates regarding the project status. On page 8, there is the second issue that we want to present to the committees related to the status of the Enoch Pratt Free Library System building. And the 23 Joint Chairman's report requested that MSLA conduct a building and facility condition analysis of all library buildings within the Enoch Pratt Free Library System. The report provides an assessment of 21 branch locations and a neighborhood design center and Baltimore City Library maintenance shop operated by the Enoch Pratt Free Library System. On page 9, Exhibit 3 shows the facility renewal cost by facility identified as necessary, potentially critical, or currently critical, with an estimated total cost of $51.1 million. Within this list, MSLA has identified 7 branches, the ones that are involved, as critical and necessitated immediate attention to ensure uninterrupted provision of services. Finally, at DLS, we recommend approve the general obligation bond authorization for the Public Library Capital Grant Program. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that great analysis. Are there any questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Andrade. Ms. Padilla, come on up. can start whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Good to see all of you and you're surviving well during this busy session. I am Irene Padilla, the Maryland State Librarian, and with me is Donna Liberto, our Chief Financial Officer, and Mary Ramey, our Grants Coordinator. We're here in support of our capital budget, and we're so grateful that it includes not only the mandated amount of $7.5 million, but the supplemental funding of $4.5 million for this program. And on behalf of the Maryland Library community, I want to thank you for your ongoing commitment to making our libraries better. We really look forward to the ongoing development of our library facilities. Since this program's implementation in fiscal 2008, your mandate to provide $5 million and now $7.5 million in capital funds annually has benefited all 24 of the state's library systems. The state's $93.8 million investment so far has been matched by local funds of approximately $375 million. So as you can see, state funding is spurring local investment. You have our written testimony and Ms. Andrade's very thorough analysis, which provides an excellent description of the program. Thank you. And I would refer you to our written testimony for more information about specific projects. Either the proposed projects or the 18 soon to be 21 beautiful new libraries that have opened because of this program. And I'm happy to say that just 2 weeks ago today, the Baden Branch Library in Prince George's County, it's less than 5,000 square feet, but it is a jewel box of a library, opened. And this was made possible by a grant, a statewide capital grant of $2.2 million. So we're very pleased about that. And I want to especially express our gratitude about your recognition of the increased mandate. That means so much to us because we were flat funded for many years, and we know that during that time the cost for construction continued to escalate. So we appreciate your continued funding. This recommendation includes one project in particular that I'd like to point out, the Forest Park Library in Baltimore City. The city's library facilities alone, as was mentioned in the analyst review, require $51.1 million to address critical issues and a total of $337.5 million to fund all of the Enoch Pratt Free Library System's necessary projects. And I know there is a Senate bill that will be heard, I believe, tomorrow. Oh, great. Okay. On that issue. Statewide, a capital needs assessment of all library systems conducted in November 2023 documented that in the next 2 years, 54 existing facilities required general renovation at an estimated cost of $106.6 million, and 18 buildings have been identified for replacement with a new structure at an estimated cost of $437.8 million. So there's a lot of needs out there. We're aware of at least 4 more new construction projects that are ready to move forward, and a growing number of renovation and expansion projects that will request funding in fiscal 2026. Additional supplemental funding or an increase in the mandate would be necessary for the agency to accommodate all these requests. So that's the only real answer I have to the analyst question. The only way we can accommodate all the requests is by continuing to ask for what we need and relying on your generosity to help us. Either that or we hold off on funding, and we all know where that leads with things going undone, especially in the city. And I will say this, that the city has the most needs of any system in the state. Their buildings, literally, some of them are crumbling, and many of them cannot open on a routine basis because of HVAC or plumbing problems. So you know what that means to the children in the area who may not be in established daycare or pre-K programs. This leaves them out in the cold. But we know we're optimistic with your ongoing support. We can remain responsive to community needs and thrive in our next number of years. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Senator King.
Remiss, Irene, if I didn't talk about all of the work that you have done for the libraries over all these years. And I don't know that I'm still ready for you to retire. We've worked together a lot of years and have done a lot of things together. And I'm sure there'll be great people following in your footsteps, which are hard to fill. But I have really enjoyed working with you and hope you enjoy your retirement.
Thank you so much. You have been such a strong supporter of libraries and continue to be a strong
Sure.
supporter. So thank you. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
all of you. I've been really enjoyed working with all of you.
Thank you. Is this your, I've been asked, is this your last public hearing or?
This is, except I will be testifying on the Freedom to Read bill tomorrow.
Okay.
Good girl. Thank
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for all your service.
Thank you.
Colleagues, will now turn our attention to the Department of Juvenile Services. We'll ask Ms. Miller to come up.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS Capital Budget Analysis of the Department of Juvenile Services. The Capital Improvement Program provides funding for one project, the Maryland Youth Residence Center renovation and expansion in fiscal 2025. The DJS Capital Program is most often used to support youth residential facilities like community residential, secured detention, and committed treatment facilities. A discussion of detention and committed populations and bed space begins on page 3 of the analysis. Exhibit 1, which provides trends for the average daily population of detained youth, appears on page 4. ADP is shown for youth who are predispositioned, those who are waiting for a placement, and those who are detained but will be processed through the adult court system. Total detained ADP fell prior to the pandemic, but actions taken in fiscal 2020 caused ADP to fall 39.1% between fiscal 2020 and 2021. Fiscal 24 year-to-date data levels are now 3.8% higher than during fiscal 2020. This growth is largely attributable to the adult court authorized populations, which make up 61% of the detained ADP in fiscal 24. On page 5, Exhibit 2 compares the rated capacity of DJS's detention facilities to its fiscal 23 average daily population. There were 341 beds available at the start of the fiscal year. The department spent most of the year with a capacity of 312, however, following the closure of facility in October of 2022. The average daily population was well below the total capacity, as will be discussed later in this analysis. Further increases to the detention populations in fiscal 24 could necessitate operational changes. The average daily population trends for the department's committed populations can be found in Exhibit 3 on page 6. State-operated placements are programs at facilities owned and operated by DJS. This placement saw a 46.8% increase in fiscal 2023, though utilization of this placement type remains 37.1% lower in year-to-date data compared with the pre-pandemic levels. The current state-operated average daily population is 75.4 youths in fiscal 24. State-run committed residential facilities do not provide adequate capacity to accommodate the number of youths requiring out-of-home placements, and nor do they provide the full complement of programming required to address the needs of the committed populations. To that end, the department contracts with private in-state and out-of-state vendors to provide services to committed youth. The private per diem average daily population decreased by about 24.1% between fiscal 22 and 23. Since fiscal 2014, the private per diem ADP has fallen 90.1%. During the pandemic, DJS made efforts to bring youth back in state and reduce the number of placements made out of state. These efforts were successful and have been continued. Fiscal 23 and estimated 24 data are 82.4% and 84.3%. Lower than in fiscal 2019. Overall, in fiscal 23, the committed average daily population rose by 4.5%, with almost all of the growth coming from placements in state-operated facilities. Growth is expected to continue in fiscal 24, and a comparison of the bed space and average daily population usage is provided in Exhibit 4 on page 8. Total committed bed space was approximately 84 during fiscal 23, and facilities operated at an average of 85.9% capacity in the same year. The CIP includes one project which would increase bed capacity for committed treatment facilities. That is the MYRC. Information about this project can be found on pages 9 and 10. The MYRC project plans to renovate and expand a DJS-owned evening reporting center in Baltimore City to create a 24-bed hardware-secure treatment facility for male youths. $1.43 million for planning is provided in fiscal 25, with the estimated total project cost being $46.1 million. This project is intended to replace the Cheltenham Youth Treatment Center, or CYTC, that was to be co-located on the grounds of the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center, or CYDC. CYTC would have had a 48-bed capacity and increased the available committed treatment facility capacity for male and female youth by 40 and 8, respectively. As scheduled, the design phase for this project, the MYRC, would begin in December 2024, and construction would begin in December of 2026. It has not yet received Program Part 1 for approval from the Department of Budget and Management. Any delays to the approval process could result in a later design phase start date. DJS is currently reviewing its long-term capital needs, which may be greater than when this project was requested. Jumping forward in the analysis document to the issues section, a comparison of detention and committed treatment utilization rates is shown in Exhibit 5 on page 10. The capacity of detention and committed treatment facilities decreased from 411 and 214 in fiscal 2019 to 312 and 84 in fiscal 24. On different occasions, facilities were closed or populations were moved to bring youth closer to their communities, to provide better services for female youth, to address staffing issues, and because of poor facility conditions. The utilization rate of detention and committed treatment facilities has increased from 68.3% and 61.2% in fiscal 2019 to 84.1% and 89.7% in fiscal 2024 year-to-date data. While operating in fewer facilities allows the department to consolidate its staff and save on other operational costs, it's unusual for the department to operate at utilization levels this high. Fluctuations or a continued rise in the population could pose significant challenges, and therefore, DLS asks that the department comment on whether it plans to reopen any recently closed facilities to support its population needs in the current year and in the allowance, or if it plans to adjust detention and committed treatment facility capacity in any way. As the DJS population needs have changed over time, the department has also reevaluated its plan for building facilities for female youth and placing them around the state. First, a detention center was going to be built in Carroll County. Then the site changed to the Cheltenham campus. Then the project was changed to be a wing, which would be added to the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center. And to accommodate these changes, and in response to other facilities being closed, the female populations were moved several times. This continues as the department seeks to consolidate the female youth population. At the start of fiscal 24, committed female youth were located at the Victor Cullen Center, while detained female youth were housed at CYDC and the Lower Eastern Shore Children's Center. All detained female youth were moved to the Western Maryland Children's Center on October 16th. Both projects deauthorized by the fiscal 2025 capital budget bill, the CYDC addition for females and the CYTC, would have included bed space for female youth on the grounds at Cheltenham. Because the average daily population for female youth is approximately 8 in fiscal 24 year-to-date data, this means that 7.7% of detention bed space is for female youth, who make up only 3% of the total detention population. We ask that DJS should clarify where female youth in state-operated committed treatment facilities would currently be located around the state, and comment on the plan for housing its female detained and committed populations in the remainder of fiscal 24 and in fiscal 2025. The department should also comment on its long-term housing plan for female youth, given its goal of locating youth closer to their families. The most recently prepared facilities master plan for DJS is from calendar 2015, though DJS reports that it expects to prepare a new facilities master plan by the end of the current year, the calendar year. The department is also reviewing its needs in relation to proposed juvenile justice legislation this session. DLS is concerned that as the department evaluates its needs and develops a new facilities master plan, this could result in changes to the MYRC's scope and the department's priorities for capital spending overall. DLS recommends deleting the design funding for the MYRC renovation and expansion project. I'll also note that the CIP includes funding for one out-year project, which is the Charles H. Hickey New Combined Services Building. Since its inclusion in the previous CIP, the estimated project cost has decreased 2% to $19.5 million, and initial design funding is planned for fiscal 2028. A summary of the key observations and the DLS recommended action to delete funding for the MYRC can be found on page 2. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Miller. That was very thorough. We appreciate it. Any questions for Ms. Miller? Okay, call up the agency. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Come on up with you and your team, and you can start whenever you get a chance.
Good afternoon. Chair Zucker, Vice Chair McCray, members of the committee. I'm Vinnie Schiraldi, Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services, joined today by Maria Martin, Director of Capital Planning, and Kara Annenson, Director of Legislation. I'd like to thank Ms. Miller for her thoughtful and thorough analysis. DJS has one capital project to review, 2 issues to address. To my knowledge, it is none of our birthdays, including Ms. Martin. First, in response to the DLS recommendation to delete the design funding for MYRC renovation and expansion, DJS respectfully requests to maintain the design funding for the MYRC renovation and expansion project. We're committed to completing a facility master plan, but cannot envision a plan that does not include a residential treatment in Baltimore City. Currently, we don't operate any residential treatment programs in the Baltimore metro area, and all our treatment facilities are located in Maryland's western region. In FY23, Baltimore City youth made up the largest percentage of placements in each of DJS's western region treatment programs, specifically 28% of placements at the Backbone Youth Center in Garrett County, 25% of the placements at the Greenridge Youth Center in Washington County, and 40% of the placements at the Victor Cullen Center near the Pennsylvania border are a result of cases originating out of Baltimore City. This is a long-standing problem that requires that all Baltimore City youth committed for treatment and rehabilitative services receive those interventions far from their homes, communities, families, and natural supports that are proven to enhance the likelihood of positive outcomes. The established research is clear. Isolation from the community negatively impacts committed youth. They don't see their parents, they don't see their siblings, they don't see their mentors, and they're far away from their schools and any sort of supportive services that would play an active part in their treatment and in meeting the short and long-term rehabilitative goals. Moreover, serving youth in or near their community allows for positive transitions and stronger connections when they're returning to their homes, families, and schools. Close proximity to educational programs, behavioral health supports, community-based programming allows for meaningful and continuous engagement with service providers and ultimately supports the implementation of a reentry plan built together with those crucial support systems. Beginning the design process to renovate and expand MYRC is necessary to support youth from Baltimore City and contribute to positive public safety outcomes. Delaying the access to design funds will result in even more time before Baltimore City youth have access to residential treatment services near their homes. Now to 2 other issues. DJS was asked to comment on whether it plans to reopen any recently closed facilities to support population needs in fiscal 24 and 25, or if it plans to adjust detention and committed treatment facility capacity in any way. At this time, DJS does not plan on reopening any recently closed facilities to support population needs in fiscal 24 or 25. Second, DJS was asked to clarify where female youth in state-operated commitment treatment facility would currently be placed, and comment on the plan for housing its female detained and committed populations in the remainder of fiscal 24 and 25. DJS should also comment on its long-term housing plan for female youth, given its goal of locating youth closer to their families. Serving girls is a top priority for our administration, and to that end, DJS is taking the following steps. We've consolidated all committed and detained girls into one location in the Western Maryland Children's Center. Detained girls were in multiple detention centers across the state, and committed girls were in a unit at Victor Cullen. All staff at WMCC are trained in providing gender-responsive care and program interventions designed to meet the diverse needs of the girls we serve. We received technical assistance from a group with national expertise regarding girls' residential and community programming provided by the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And third, we acknowledge the need to address the female committed population and are exploring options as we develop the facility master plan. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
I'm sorry I'm a little thick on this stuff, as I demonstrated during the budget hearing on Friday. So how many total beds do you have that are operational now?
The committed or detained? What, the committed beds or the detained bed? Which ones?
Do you mean somebody in the bed or not in the bed?
Oh, no, committed is after you're convicted and sentenced, and detained is like pretrial jail.
Yes.
So I'll give you both.
Yeah.
But I don't know them off the top of my head. Maria, do you know? It's on here somewhere. Oh, okay, great. So the total number of, go ahead. Of detained beds is 269. That's pretrial.
Pretrial.
And
369?
269.
269, yeah.
And committed is 73. That's sentenced,
Okay.
convicted and sentenced, if you will.
That's very helpful. So the overwhelming number, and is the system, are the buildings and the systems designed that way, or that's just who shows up on the bed? I mean.
Oh, no, they're designed that way.
They're designed that way.
Yeah. And that's, by the way, the committed beds are the ones that the state operates. There's also a bunch of committed beds like group homes that we contract for. Understand what I'm saying? So the judge
Committed is after conviction.
Correct.
And about how many of those beds are there?
Sorry, what did you ask?
Group home beds.
Oh, right now, how many are occupied right now? 34 plus 21.
55.
55. So for folks post-conviction, it's 55 plus 73.
Correct.
Gotcha. And the facility that you want in Baltimore is for which group?
Committed. Sentenced.
Sentenced, okay. And that's 25 beds?
24.
24 beds. I mean, one of my impressions looking at these charts is your numbers are so small that it must be hard to predict how many beds you're going to need.
Yeah.
So help me through that in terms of thinking about capital.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because Ms. Martin pointed out that, Ms. Miller pointed out that we're at 84, 89% of capacity, which if you were running an adult system is fine. That's what you're shooting for 90%. For kids, it's a little different because 89% means 3 kids away
No, I
from.
understand.
Yeah. So, so first of all, we agree that we need a facility master plan. And we don't have one just yet. We were, we'll have to do a better job of that, and that will include forecasting our community needs as well. Because, for example, we have a lot of kids in our placement facilities, our treatment facilities, if you will, where kids are sentenced because they have drug problems, but the state of Maryland doesn't have a residential drug treatment program for adolescents. So we expect that when that opens, some of the kids that judges put in Backbone, Greenridge, and Victor Cullen will instead go to residential drug treatment because their primary issue is drug problems.
So that's new capacity.
That will be new capacity by the Department of Health. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the risk of the kids over the last several years
We'll take a look at their needs. We'll take a look at placement patterns. We'll talk to the judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys to estimate what their appetite is for various points along the continuum, locked, staff secure, group homes, community wraparound programs. We'll give you our best forecast in about a year.
Gotcha. And I presume, I think I know this, but correct me if I don't know this, that the committed folks are considerably longer term than the other folks.
You know, it used to be that way, but 61% of kids in detention now, kids in detention used to come and go in about a month.
Okay, yeah.
But 61% of the kids in detention now are being held and being tried as adults. So actually, it's more of an adult facility, if you will, than a juvenile facility in detention. And those are hanging around somewhere between 5 months and a year before their cases get fully processed in the adult system.
And that's because the adult system is just far behind.
Well, there's two reasons. One is that they just have the law about case processing times is slower, it allows you to take longer. And the second is when a kid is being tried as an adult, the ramifications are so serious that the public defenders put on, you know, sort of very vigorous defense. They hire, psychologists and social workers, and it's a big deal. It's not, there are no routine cases that are being tried as adults.
And that's essentially what Exhibit 1 means in the analysis.
Pardon me?
That's what Exhibit 1 on page 4 means, where it says average daily population and percentage of adult court authorized. That's 61%. That's the 61% you're talking about.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And the line chart as well.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions for the secretary or his team? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes today's capital budget subcommittee hearings.